All CSS selectors. Hello everyone, welcome to this channel. In this video we are going to talk about all CSS selectors with examples. In CSS you have many types of selectors. You have class-based selectors, you have ID selector, you have element selector, pseudo element selector, you have pseudo class selector. The first selector is class. When you use this class selector, it selects and CSS all elements with that class name. Then you have another way to select all elements that have two or more classes that you specify. For example, here we selected all elements that have active and btn classes, and you assign the class like this, or set the class name like this, active, and then separate space, and then the name of the class, and you can add here more and more, and then just combine here dot and the name of the class, and then you get it. Let us try it. Here test child has two classes, test child and pg-info. Here in CSS we only use one class, but if we give here also pg-info, it still works. Now this is that one. This is useful, for example, if you have multiple containers or elements with the same classes, but one has different class. For example, you here say test child, and then bigger info, and the one is for example with warning. Now the parent container has overflow hidden. If we remove that, we see also the third one. You see that the style now works for test child pg info, but not for test child pg warning. We can change that, for example, only if we want to do that on warning. Now you see that the rest has no width and no height and nothing. It has background, but because it has no width and no height, so it does not show up. You don't see anything. Let us try here different thing, and we say for the test child to have the same width. Control C. On test child, this style, and for the background with warning, we wanted to do not have any margin auto, just have margin top, and then the width should be like 50, and the height should be like 71, and it gets the margin auto from the test child because it also contains test child. We can override that. Margin 0, like, let us remove that overflow from here, so we don't need to disable that. Now you see that the one with the background warning is at the left side, and the other one are at the center, because it has a margin 0 and only margin top. So this is kind of the use of combining multiple CSS classes for the same element. Then you have something else to select the child elements of another element. Let me show you. Here we say test container test child. If we do it this way, it will still work, but make sure to add here space. It is not the same without space. So now if you do this, it will not work, because now you say here that these two classes are on the same element, but if you give space, you say that the second class is the child of the element with this class. So we have this test container and it has child with the test childs, and it still works perfectly. And then you have a selector with the ID. For example, here you also gave an ID warning, and then instead of using this one, you can just use ID number sign and then the name of the ID that was warning, for example. Now you see that it works perfectly the same with the ID selector. And then you have like global or general selector. You can use this as global selector to say all elements. Let us say here like this, all elements should have, for example, color blue. Now you see that the color of all elements, all text is changed to blue, except the button that it has a color specified for the element itself. Then you say button primary, and then it has a color white here. If you disable this style here in the tools, you see that it gets blue color, but because the background is also blue, you don't see the color. The reason that we see here that the color from the global selector did not work on the button is because of the CSS specificity hierarchy. We will talk about that later. Here we are selecting all elements inside this document this way. You can also say, for example, div, you have element selector, and then say here every child of div element inside this document should have, let's say, background color red. If you have any div in this document inside our HTML, should have background color red. Now see here we have div, and then here we have div, but the background did not work for this. That's also because of the CSS specificity, and also something other thing that here is background color, and here you have background, and then here also background is overwritten by this. That's also because of CSS specificity. This is the global selector, and this one is the class selector. Class selector has higher specificity or priority on global selector, so that's why you see that this style got applied. You can override that by using by forcing it using important, and now you see that it works. I use div to show you an example of element selector. So when you say any element, you have paragraph p element, you have div, you have section, you have input, you have many elements that you can just use the name of the element, and then it will select all elements with that name in your document. And then you can combine element with a class. Here we use just the class name. We can combine this element with the class name, div test container. It will work perfectly. See, no problem. And then you have you can combine different, if you want to apply the same style on different elements, instead of repeating that style, you can apply that style on multiple elements or multiple class names, combining them with the element, class name, ID, and any other CSS selectors, and separating them using comma and giving the same style just once, and it will work. Here we want that this div element, this div element, this paragraph element, and this paragraph element, they all should have the same style. So we are going to combine different CSS selectors and joining them using comma and giving them style. First we use element selector and say section div, and then we use separating them by comma, and then div, and there is another div here with the class test t. Use div dot test t, and then we want here this paragraph element with the class pel dot pel, and this one has id test pa, and gave here a style like say font size 39 pixel, color should be let's say red. You have also something called later spacing. For now let's say 2 pixels. And here is a problem. We have inside this section multiple div elements, so this will select all div elements inside this section. So this will include also this div element and also this div element, but we also want this div element. Here for this we can select that using pseudo class. We will see it here. We have pseudo classes, and then for pseudo class, to use pseudo class you use colon, and then here you say first child, and this will select the div element that is the first child of this section element. And let us see. Now you see that this is a title, another test title, this is the first element, this is the second element, and they all have the same style. So instead of giving the same style 4 times, we can use comma separated selectors to give the same style to multiple elements inside our document. You see, this still works perfectly, but we have many repetitive code inside our CSS library. Then we have CSS Combinators. For example, here we selected all H3 elements that are inside this section, whether it is the first child of this section, whether it is in another level, probably you have another section inside of this, and inside that section you have H3 elements. So this selects all H3 elements that are inside this section. Another one is section and then angle bracket H3, for example. It selects all H3 elements where the parent is as section element. So this is only the first level child. Let us try it. Here we have a section, here we have a div element, and here we say h3. Say the first h3, and here we also gave h3. We say in the second h3 we use the CSS Combinator, section angle bracket h3. We say font size 50 pixel, and then color green, this green. Now you see it selects all h3 elements where the section is its parent. If we move this from here inside this div element, then section will not be its parent and it will not work. You see the second h3. Here I use HTML element name, but it can be any other selectors. It can be class, it can be ID, it can be combination of element and ID, element and class. It can be combination of class and ID, and everything else. This is just an example of these selectors and this selector. So this one, a selector plus another selector. It can be anything. It can be element, class, ID, combination of class and IDs and element and IDs, plus another one, and it selects the first, that selector, in this case div element, that is placed immediately after that section element. Let us try it out. Here we have section element, and immediately after that we create here another div. Immediately after section element, section plus div. We want the style to be font style. We want that the div element that is immediately after the section element, that is, it is font style is italic, and you have a text decoration to be underlined. Now you see this, it is directly after the section element. If we copy this element and say not immediately after section element, you see that this is the default style. So only if you want to select an element that is immediately after another element, you can use the plus sign. Then you have tilde selector or combinator. You have one selector, tilde, and another selector. It selects every p element, that is the second selector, that is preceded by a div element. So this one works if both are at the same level, or both must have the same parent. Here we have a dummy example. We have a section, div element, and then paragraph element after div element, and they have the same parent. And here is another p element here, that is after this p element, and then a div element, and then element, and then two other div elements, and then anchor element, and then paragraph element. Let us use that tilde selector to select all the paragraphs using that one. Till p, we say font size 25 pixel, font weight we want it to be bold, and then we want it to have a text shadow. We want it to have 2 pixel to the right, and then 2 pixel to bottom, and then 1 pixel like blur, and then gold color, and it is a color should be something pink, but it has to be dark pink. This color. Let's see. Now you see we have all the paragraph element that are after any div element and has the same parent or selected. You see inside HTML. So this big paragraph with dummy text is after this div element, and they have the same parent, that is the body element. And then we have this example, and inside of this we have all these p elements that are after a div element and have the same parent. Then we have CSS attribute selectors. You have many attributes in HTML, and you can have also your own custom attribute in HTML. Then you can use those attributes as a CSS selector. Let us use here, for example, the target. If you use here square bracket, the name of the attribute, and then close it with a square bracket, it selects all elements with that attribute. So here we give anchor element, and we gave it target, for example, blank, dummy link, and then we use here target. Now the link has you see here the link has underline, it has the link color and the link style. We change that, we change the text decoration to none, from underline to none, and then we change in the color from the link blue to green. Now it is green and has no underline. Now if there would be any other anchor element with the target attribute, or any other element with target attribute, then it will select those two. Then you can also select any attribute with a specified or with a specific value. In this case, type text, for example, let's say here we have input, and the default type for input is text, so type text. So we say type equal sign, and then here the value for that attribute, and here we now let's see how it looks like without the style. Without the style, the input looks like this. We change it as outline 2 pixel solid gold. We gave it width 250 pixel. We gave it padding 5 pixel. We gave it border radius 9 pixels, and we gave it border 1 pixel blue dashed. Now you see it got the other style. Now the border is 1 pixel. Let's increase the border here. You have this border. Then you can also have, for example, your own custom attribute. Let's say here I say temp value and then Acionus. Select all elements with the temp val attribute containing the word Acionus. Div element testing custom attribute, and here we say temp val Acionus, and then we create multiple of this. Here temp val username, user ID, that's just an example. Attribute 1, 2, 3. So here we have custom attributes with different values, and we only want to select the one with the word Acionus. So it is the same way as this one. So temp val, and then here pass the value. Font size 33 pixels, and then letter spacing 5 pixels. Color tilde. Now you see we have here different div elements. We have testing custom attribute 2233, and the 1 got this style, so we only selected that one. Here you see that we are using directly in the attribute. You can combine this attributes with any element, with any other selectors. Like you can use here class, you can use here element, and etc. For example, here we use the image AMG, and it has attribute src for the source, and then the word nature. But first, this one we have this pipe character. It means select all elements with a class attribute value equal to container or starting with container. Here you can use expression to search for things like all elements with the class, if it is class contains or starts with container, with the word container. And then here select as every image element whose src attribute value begins with nature. if the value begins, only begins. Here is equal or start. Here is only start. Starting or begins with that word that you specify here. And then you have a $sign. Select as every image element whose src attribute value index with png. For example, in case you want to search all images that are png images, you can use this. And then here you have star. You can use that to select every element whose attribute value contains the string that you specify here, in our case archeros. It is not necessary that we try this stuff. You try them and then I'm sure that you will understand. It's very simple and clear. And then we have CSS Pseudo Class Selectors. What are pseudo classes? Pseudo classes are the way that you can define the state of elements inside your document or web page. For example, here you have for the link active, that's the state, and you say if it is a link that are unvisited links, then you have visited, then you have state hover, checked, default. So for pseudo class you have a colon, and you also have a pseudo element. Pseudo element is used to style some part of an element. For example, here you can add something in your element at the end of that, or you can add something at the beginning of that element, or selecting just the first letter of an element or the first line of an element. To select it here is a very useful thing in CSS, the marker, to select the marker of list items. And then here you have placeholder to select inputs with the placeholder attribute as specified. And then here you have selection to select it the portion of an element that is selected by a user. For example, now if I select this, I see the background blue and the color white. Using the selection selector, pseudo element selector, you can change this. I will show you that. But first, I give you some example of this one. These are very simple: active, link, visited. I give you an example of hover. Let's say this is a link, so it has no URL. It's just a link. I gave it a class link, and then here I gave test link. Here I say link, then pseudo class. You can type here hover. You have many pseudo classes that you can use. And when we hover, now is nothing. Now this is test link. When I hover or bring my mouse on this element, nothing happens. But if I click, it will go somewhere. But in our case, it has no URL, so it jumps at the beginning of the page. So on hover, we want that it is color is black, and it is background color is tilde. It is does not go with each other, white. That it has padding 5 pixel. That it has border radius like 3 pixels. Let's see. Now if I hover, you see it got background, it got another text color, it got padding and stuff. Let us say that we want the font size to be 50 pixel when we hover over that. Something crazy, you see. So that is what a hover is. That's a pseudo class. And then the input, check it, create here an input input type and checkboxes. So if this input is check it, input, if it is check it, we want it is width to be like 90 pixel, and height should be 80 pixel. It should have border 3 pixels, dotted black. So this is our input. When we check, you see it got huge. When it's not check it is like that. Then you have default selectors and the default input element. It can be any other element as well, the default, and you can have disabled, you can have disabled button. So most of the time these are just the attributes. You have disabled attribute, and then you have also checked attribute for the input, and then you can style any empty element. It is say we create, let's check if there is any empty div. Of course there are some empty divs, so we want to style them differently to give them like width 300 pixels, 400 pixel. Let's see if we have any empty. Because the style is overwritten by the class. It is also something about the CSS specificity hierarchy. And if we disable this style, it gets the style from this pseudo class. So this is also something interesting that you should take in consideration when you're styling your document or your web page, that you know the CSS specificity hierarchy. It is very, very important. Otherwise you will get confused. Why the hell is this not working? And then you have here beautiful tools. If something is not working, inspect it, check if it is overwritten by another style, and then you know, oh, there is a mistake. The class has higher priority than pseudo class. So then you have input enabled pseudo class. It selects every enabled input element, and then you have the first child. We used that already. Select this element that is the first child of another element, or it is parent. And then you can combine this with the class name, for example HDR first type of. Select every element with the class this that is the first element inside its parent, or the first element of its parent. So this order you have the input focus. Let us use that. We have a input check focus. We have here an input. We say when that input gets focus, we want it to have another style. Input focus. We want that the outline is we have outline color should be blue. Here now we have this one. You see when it gets focused, the outline gets blue. inspecting this one. Then you see now this list. This is a very long list. There are many other CSS pseudo classes that are very interesting, but it takes a lot of time to try all of them. Now you just note them in somewhere, take a note, and know that these pseudo classes exist. And then in case you need them, then you can use them. You have invalid. For example, if an input gets an invalid value, and then you have long for the language. For example, in case some part of your application has another language, you can select that with that by specifying the language name. And then you have last child to get the last element in another element. This selects all div element that is the last child of its parent. And then last of type, this is also is the last p element of its parent. And then not is very interesting. Select every element that is not a p element. So not p, not, you can also give here any selector, not only element name. You can give here class id. If that's not that, give it that style. And then you have nth child. It is very interesting. For example, you want to target only the third child, and then select this the paragraph element that is the third child of its parent. Then here you have the second, the fourth, again the third, and here is the explanation that you can read. And then only child, only of type, optional, out of range is interesting. That read only, you have input read only, you have text area read only. Read only means that you cannot edit or modify that input. Let us give you an example here. Here I have an input, and then here I give value. Thanks for watching, liking, and sharing my video. This is the value that I gave. Now you see, thanks for watching, liking, blah blah blah. So let us give this input here we have a style for the input type text. Control C, Control V. Outline width, we want it to be 400. Padding border, radius border, blah blah blah. Now we see, thanks for watching, liking, and sharing my video. With the focus, you see that the outline changes. Other than that, the outline is gold and in gate is blue. So our goal is to see, now you can change it. You can remove some the characters. You can empty, you can enter new input texts and stuff. But when you make it read only, no one can modify it unless you can go to the browser and then inspect it and remove that attribute. So you have read only, and now I cannot modify it. I cannot enter, I cannot remove, I cannot do anything. So that is very interesting. And using this selector read only, you can target that and style that how you want. For example, let us say input read only should have padding top and bottom 9 pixel, right and left 5 pixel. Now you see it got more padding top and bottom. Then you have read write also for input, also for text area. You have also read only for the text area. So input is a single line input for the user so that they can enter short sentence. If you want to enter multi-line text, huge big text, then you can use a text area. And then you have read write. Select as text area element with the read only attribute not specified. If you do not specify the attribute read only, that is automatically read write. So you can read it, you can write it, you can modify it. And then you have required, also an attribute. It is required that you must fill that input, and it selects text area with the required attribute specified. And then you have root. We have seen that, we saw that at the beginning of this video, and where we specified some CSS variables. And another thing about CSS variables, that you can modify the CSS variables. For example, you can overwrite that like this and say here, for example, we want the primary to be another color. Let us say gold. Move it up. Now the color primary is gold everywhere in our document. Now we have not used the color primary. Let us use it somewhere. Let us say the not immediate has the class primary. Now it got the color gold. So we modified this color value only inside this class, only inside the primary. But if we say primary2, let us say pr aim for primary2, and here we say color variable primary, it is still blue. So here it is the primary, the modified value, and here for this one we say prm2, that is primary2, and the primary2 got the color of the original value. So this way you can modify or override the value of CSS variable in case you need it in a specific part of your page. And then here you have also target pseudo class selectors the current active element. Click it on a URL containing that anchor name, and then you have a valid pseudo class selectors all input elements with a valid value. Then you have here, for example, icon double colon after, so it inserts something after an element. And then you have before, you have first, later. Let us try them out. Here we have I, and then say I am icon, So I double colon after we say here, for example, it is mostly used in this way, that you set the content to something, for example an icon, to set some attribute URL, for example if you want to add any image icon. But here I say here after text, here you say I am icon, and I added here after text. Let us inspect in this. So this is the I element, is mostly for the icon. It is also italic, is used also to create italic text. And here you see the style I colon colon after, then the content is after text, and then you can say the color to be blue, and then the color of the content that is added after that is now blue. And you can do the same for using a pseudo element before. In this before is used a lot to insert icon for menu items and etc. I say here before color to be tilde, for the after color. Now you see for the before it has that color and that text, and for the after is that text with that color. It is mostly not used to insert some text or stuff. It is used to insert some very specific characters that you have in CSS that are not allowed in HTML, or you have to use specific codes, HTML codes for those characters to be shown inside your document or page. And in CSS you have some cool characters and very short codes, later codes for those characters that are very handy to use in CSS. And these pseudo elements before and after are used to insert those characters, icons, image icons, and etc. Then you have first later. Let us use the first letter on this big speech. Give it class speech. For example, speech first letter. We want the first letter of this speech to have a huge font size, like 99 pixel, and the font family should be bold, and then the font weight bold. The font family should be cursive. Let us see how it looks like. Now you see the first letter is looking like that. It is disgusting font family cursive. Oh my god. So Tahma, it looks now like that. We can give it here like marge top 50 pixel. Did not work the marge top for that. It's only something interesting. Let us say change it to padding. Nothing. Then you have the first line. Let us change this from first letter to first line. This is going to be like this. That is the first line. So probably you think this is not the first line because the font size is huge. It also selected two words and it is the first line, so you see it at the first line. If you change that, if you change the font size to a smaller font size, it's say 20, you will have more words here, you see. So this is the speech, and here is our style for the first line, and this is the font size. If you increase, so because the size of words gets larger and larger, it takes more space, so that's why you see less words in one line. So this is the first line pseudo element. Then you have marker. This is interesting that we can change the marker of let us create here some unordered list, 111. Now you see this is the default style for unordered line. By using the marker pseudo element, we say marker, we can change everything about that. We can change the marker font size to let's say 25 pixel. Now you see a bigger marker. You can change the color to gold. You can do whatever you want. You can change in the list style, and then here you have a circle, lowercase Latin, none. Outside you have a square. Let us use the square, and did not work. It did not work like that because you cannot change that there, but you can certainly change the list style square. Now it is square, so you cannot change this style using the marker pseudo element, but you can change the marker style itself. Let's say 35. Now it is bigger, it is square. Then you have placeholder. Select this input element with the placeholder attribute specified. That is very simple. You try it there. You have selection. Let us try this one. It is interesting. Selection. For the selection, we want the background color to be gold. and the color to be black. Now you see it is gold and black. If we remove this style, when we select it, the color is now white and the background is blue. But with our style, we can change that. This is interesting because in some part of your application, if you have another style and you want to select, or user wants to select that, then it will not look so professional. So you can customize the look of your user interface the way you want. So these were CSS selectors, most of CSS selectors. These are actually all of CSS selectors, but you have more options in Pseudo Element, you have more options in Pseudo Class, but in general you have class-based CSS selector. You can combine different classes as CSS selector. You have ID as a CSS selector, you have global selector, you have element selector. You can combine element with class, element with element, and then you have CSS combinators, and then you have attributes. You can combine attributes with class, with ID, with element name, and then you have a lot of options with pseudo class. You can combine pseudo class with the element name, with the class name, with the ID attribute, and another selectors. And you can do the same thing with the pseudo element. For example, here we generally set, like this is globally selection of all the document should get this style, but if we want only speech, the paragraph element with this class gets that, it works perfectly. Now if I select it here, I see the default selected, but if I select it here, I see another style. So you can combine these CSS selectors together and to style your user interface. I hope it was clear. If you have any question about CSS selectors, comment your question below the video. I will answer as soon as possible.